What if the most powerful person in a billionaire's mansion wasn't the man who owned it, but the woman hired to clean it? In a house where 15 professionals had failed, where grief had hardened 2 little girls into master manipulators, and where every adult was just another casualty, one woman walked in with no degree, no wealth, and no fear. She didn't come to tidy up. She came to face ghosts, both living and lost. And in the war between love and trauma, she wasn't there to survive. She was there to win. This is the story of how a so-called nobody changed everything by refusing to leave. They say every mansion has its secrets, but this one didn't whisper. It screamed. On the outside, the Harrows estate was a portrait of perfection, a sprawling, sun-drenched compound tucked in the lush hills above Westbridge. Inside, a battlefield no professional had ever survived. Not maids, not tutors, not therapists. In less than 8 months, 15 housekeepers had fled, some crying, some cursing, all defeated by 2 angelic-looking girls with identical golden curls and very, very sharp minds. This isn't a ghost story, unless you count the kind of ghosts grief leaves behind. It's the story of a grieving billionaire, his wild daughters, and one woman with no credentials but more strength than 100 resumes. A woman who didn't come to clean their house, she came to clean their hearts. This is how Eleanor James rewrote what it means to raise children broken by loss and shattered every class, race and societal prejudice in her way. Weston Harrow had built an empire of glass towers and steel ambition. A real estate magnate whose name echoed through Forbes and financial forums alike. He controlled billions in assets but couldn't manage his own home. Not since the accident. His wife, Lillian, had been the warm thread holding their family together. Her death in a car crash 3 years prior tore through the Harrow family like a hurricane and left Weston the sole parent to his twin daughters, Ivy and Isla, who were just 6 when it happened. By the time they turned 9, the damage was evident. The girls were intelligent, imaginative, and completely feral. Any adult who dared get close was met with psychological warfare dressed in pink, frilly dresses, on a rainy Wednesday morning. Weston found himself once again signing a severance check, this time for a woman named Delia who had lasted 4 days. She'd fled the estate in tears, blue paint splattered down her uniform, murmuring something about snakes and glitter bombs. "This is insane," Weston muttered, watching her speed down the drive. "We're running out of agencies." The mansion echoed with silence. The girls were upstairs, likely plotting their next ambush. He didn't blame them, not entirely. They were smart. They were hurting. But he was out of answers. That was when his assistant, Ruth, knocked hesitantly. "Sir," she said, "I know it's unconventional, but my cousin knows someone. She's not from a placement agency, no degrees, no license. But they say she's the only one who can handle children like this." Weston raised an eyebrow. "Define like this." Ruth smiled faintly. "Ones who aren't just misbehaving. Ones who are grieving, angry, afraid. She's got experience that doesn't fit on a resume." Weston leaned back. "Fine. What's her name?" "Eleanor James," Ruth said. "Single mother. 7 kids. Life hasn't been easy on her, but that's exactly why people trust her." Eleanor arrived the next day. No SUV, no designer handbag, just a dented hatchback and a calm face that looked like it had weathered every storm and still come out. Standing. She wore jeans, sensible shoes, and her tightly coiled hair was pulled back into a bun that meant business. When she stepped into the Harrow estate, she didn't marvel at the Italian marble floors or the vaulted ceilings. She noticed the tiny cracks in the corners, the smudges on the walls, the broken vase someone had tried to glue back together. "They're expressive," she said, pointing to crayon marks that looped across a wall like graffiti. "Or destructive." Weston muttered. Eleanor turned. Often the same thing when kids don't have the words. She listened patiently as Weston recounted the entire saga. The accidents, the refusal to attend therapy, the housekeepers who ran away. She asked one question. "Have they ever cried in front of you?" "Not since the funeral," he said. Eleanor nodded. "They're testing every adult. Seeing who stays, who runs." Weston looked up. "You think you won't run?" Eleanor smiled. "Oh, I've seen worse. What room are they in?" The twins were waiting. Always were. They'd heard the murmurs from the marble stairwell. Another adult. Another target. Another experiment. In their matching rose-pink dresses, hair in perfect braids, Ivy and Isla sat cross-legged on their bedroom carpet, surrounded by open coloring books and half-missing crayons, deliberate chaos arranged to look like innocence. They were small, soft-spoken, and terrifying. Not because of what they did, but why they did it, to test love by destroying it first. When Eleanor entered the room, she didn't pause. She didn't comment on their cuteness, or kneel like other adults, or offer sugary introductions. She scanned the room, the shredded doll on the windowsill, the subtle odor of nail polish in the vents, and simply said, "Whose idea was the glue on the doorknob?" The silence broke the performance. Ivy's smile cracked slightly. Isla blinked. "We don't know what you're talking about," said Ivy, the rehearsed denial polished smooth. "Sure you don't," Eleanor replied, sitting in a chair without waiting for an invitation. "You can keep up the act for now. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here because I don't scare easy." They didn't know what to make of her. No one had ever started that way. The usual pattern was cooing, gentle boundary setting, then panic when things went wrong. But Eleanor was neither deferential nor dismissive. She saw them, not the surface. And it was unsettling. That night, as she left the room, she said over her shoulder, "I'll be here tomorrow. And the day after, and after that, you can try to break me. You won't." The girls didn't smile. They didn't frown either. For the first time in years, they were unsure. By morning, the house was set for war. The twins had spent the night crafting their masterpiece. In the fridge, a decapitated doll head, ketchup smeared artfully around its neck, staged beside a scribbled note that read, "Leave while you can." On the table, a booby-trapped juice glass with salt instead of sugar. A sandwich made with toothpaste, crusts trimmed, classic misdirection. Psychological warfare disguised as playful rebellion. At 7:03 a.m. sharp, Eleanor walked into the kitchen. She greeted them casually. "Good morning, girls." She opened the fridge, paused, pulled out the doll's head, wiped it off with a dish towel, placed it gently next to the body, and continued. "Looking for eggs." "Someone lost this," she said, as if commenting on a misplaced spoon. Ivy and Isla exchanged a glance. This wasn't the reaction they expected. "You're not scared?" asked Isla. "I've seen worse," Eleanor said without looking up. Ever cleaned up after 5 teenagers and a stomach flu outbreak? This is nothing. After breakfast, the next operation went into motion. While Eleanor vacuumed the living room, Ivy repeatedly unplugged the cord from the wall. Not once, not twice, 4 times, Eleanor didn't get angry. She simply turned to Ivy and said, "You seem very interested in electricity. Want to learn how this works?" Ivy froze. I wasn't. No accusation, Eleanor interrupted. I just figured you might like to help. Understanding tools can be fun. For the first time, Ivy didn't know whether she'd won or lost. Lunch was worse, or rather, better, from the twins' perspective. A sandwich stuffed with toothpaste, juice spiked with vinegar. Eleanor took a bite, paused, and set it down. "You know," she said, "when I was your age, I ate toothpaste sometimes. Not for pranks, because there was nothing else. You get used to it, but I think we can do better. Want to make something together?" She got up, pulled out fresh ingredients, and began slicing bread. "No tricks," she added softly, "just sandwiches." Something shifted. For a moment, the air wasn't full of tension, but curiosity. The girls helped, cautiously, and even laughed once when Eleanor dropped a spoon. It was Isla who cracked first. "Why didn't you get mad?" she asked. "We were awful." Eleanor wiped her hands. "Because you're not awful. You're scared, angry, grieving. You think if people like you, they'll leave, so it's easier to drive them away first. Right?" The twins didn't reply. Their eyes did. "I lost my mom when I was 9, Eleanor said. The kitchen fell into silence. And for a long time, I thought if I cared about anyone again, I'd lose them too. So I made sure they couldn't get close until someone didn't leave, someone stayed, and showed me that grief doesn't make you unlovable, it just makes you afraid." Ivy's voice cracked. "We don't want you to leave." "But we also do," Isla nodded, "because if you stay and then disappear." Eleanor knelt beside them. "I'm not here because of a paycheck. I'm here because you matter. And nothing you do is going to make me stop believing that." The next morning, the house was quiet in a way that made Mr. Harrow nervous. Weston had left early for a meeting, half expecting a frantic call from Eleanor by noon. But when he returned, he didn't find chaos. He found pancakes, poorly made, slightly burnt, and flour-covered daughters grinning from ear to ear. "Surprise," they chirped in unison. Eleanor stood at the stove, calmly guiding the mess towards something edible. "They wanted to cook," she said simply, "so we're cooking." Weston nearly dropped his briefcase. Ivy had flour in her hair. Isla was holding a spatula like a sword, but they were laughing. Not that high-pitched, manic giggle he'd grown used to, but something deeper, real. Eleanor had done what therapists, counselors, and every hired expert failed to do. She'd earned their trust. And not with bribes or threats, but with consistency. With presence. The girls didn't need a nanny. They needed someone who could look past the monster masks and see the terrified children underneath. As the days passed, the war officially ended. Ivy stopped hiding fake bugs in Eleanor's shoes. Isla started asking questions, real ones, about Eleanor's life, her kids, her struggles. At night, Eleanor would tuck them into bed and read aloud from books they once used to. Tear pages from. One night, just as she turned out the lights, Ivy whispered into the dark, "Do you promise you won't die in a car crash?" Eleanor's heart froze. That was the wound, the deepest one. Not just abandonment, but loss they thought was inevitable. "No one can promise that," she said gently. "But I promise that as long as I'm alive, you're not alone." Outside the bedroom, Mr. Harrow was standing silently in the hallway, listening. He realized then that Eleanor had done something he himself couldn't. She'd cracked open the sealed vault where his daughters had hidden their grief. For 3 years, he had tiptoed around the trauma, thinking if he just kept things normal, they'd recover. But Eleanor hadn't tiptoed. She walked straight into the storm and offered them an umbrella. Then came the party. It was Ivy and Isla's 10th birthday, and for the first time since Lillian's death, Weston threw a real celebration. Guests arrived, business associates, neighbors, socialites who thought sugar cookies and charity brunches made them virtuous. One such guest was Patricia Langford, wife of a federal judge and unofficial queen of the Westbridge elite. With her designer heels and weaponized smile, Patricia glided through the house, taking mental notes like a royal inspector general. Her daughter, Camille, was a 10-year-old snob in training with a predatory instinct for vulnerability. Patricia's voice cut through the air like a glass shard. "Weston, darling, are you certain it's wise to leave someone like that unsupervised with your valuables?" Her voice was low, but not low enough. "My friend's maid sold their alarm code to burglars." Mr. Harrow stiffened. "Eleanor is trusted. She's family." Patricia sniffed. "Yes, well, appearances can be deceiving. Some people know how to blend in until they get what they want." Eleanor didn't flinch. She kept arranging fruit platters like she hadn't heard a thing. But Ivy and Isla did. They were across the room, and their faces shifted. The old rage flickered. That defensiveness they thought they had buried came rushing back. Camille, always sensing a moment to dominate, approached the twins. "So this is the magical nanny," she smirked. "My mom says people like her only know how to control kids because they're used to yelling in their homes." Isla clenched her fists. "She's not our nanny. She's our family." Camille raised her perfectly arched eyebrows. "Family? She's a black maid, Isla. She's paid to pretend she cares." Ivy stepped forward, tears burning in her eyes. "You don't know anything about her." "I know enough," Camille shot back. "My mom says they're dangerous, sneaky." And then Eleanor appeared, calm as ever, tray of brownies in hand. "Camille," she said sweetly, "would you like to try one?" Camille recoiled. "No thanks. I don't eat food from people like you. Who knows what's in it?" Silence fell. Even the champagne in the adults' glasses seemed to freeze. Ivy's mouth hung open. Isla looked ready to scream, but Eleanor only smiled, placing the tray on the table. "No problem," she said. "There's plenty for everyone else." And she walked away. That night, after the guests left, the dam broke. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ivy asked, pacing. "She insulted you, right in front of everyone." "Yeah," Isla added. "Why didn't you tell Dad what Camille's mom said?" Eleanor sat down on the couch, motioning for them to join. "Do you know what people like that fear the most?" she asked. "That they'll lose the things they think make them superior. Money, status, appearances. So they try to make others feel small, but I'm not small. And I'm not here to prove anything to them, only to you. But they were cruel, Ivy whispered. And you think their opinion matters more than yours? Eleanor asked. Because it doesn't. What matters is how you treat others, not how they treat you. Isla stared. Have you always been treated like that? Eleanor smiled. More times than I can count. But I learned something. The best revenge isn't anger. It's excellence. It's being so good they can't ignore you. 3 days after the party, Weston Harrow noticed something odd. Eleanor wasn't just tidying the living room. She was scribbling notes between vacuuming strokes, surrounded by books on psychology, trauma recovery, and child development journals. Charts, quotes, annotated post-its all spilled out from a plain brown folder labeled Case Study, Emotional Reintegration Post-Loss. He paused in the doorway. Grace, he said slowly, using her first name for the first time. What is all this? Eleanor looked up without apology. I'm writing something. Something important. She explained that a former classmate, now Dr. Sarah Mitchell, had reached out. Sarah was organizing a national conference on trauma and child psychology and had invited Eleanor to speak. You're presenting? At a conference? Weston asked, still processing. I thought you didn't finish college. Eleanor's smile barely flickered. I didn't then. I do now. Finished my degree while working 2 jobs. My master's in child psychology is halfway done. Paused to raise my kids. Never stopped studying, though. Weston blinked. Why? Why? Didn't you tell me? You didn't ask, she replied simply. You needed someone to help your daughters, not a resume. In the corner, Ivy and Isla listened. Quietly. They hadn't known either. They had accepted Eleanor as powerful in their lives, but not as an expert. And now, the word expert hung in the air like a crown they hadn't realized she wore. Later that afternoon, Eleanor gathered the girls. I need to ask your permission, she said. Dr. Mitchell wants me to speak about your story. Not using your names or photos. Just what we've all been through. How we turned something broken into something whole again. Isla frowned. You're going to tell people about us? Only the healing part, Eleanor said. Only the part where 2 incredible girls taught a whole community how to love better. Ivy thought for a long moment. Will Patricia be there? Eleanor smiled. Funny you should ask. She's on the board of 3 children's charities. My guess is she'll be front row. Isla's eyes lit up. Do it, Ivy nodded. Let them hear it. But this wasn't revenge, not for Eleanor. This was revelation, and it wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about standing in a space that had long been reserved for white coats and Ivy, league degrees, and daring to speak with truth. Sharper than any diploma, the conference was held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, an ocean of professionals in expensive suits, panels lined with PhDs, and plastic lanyards announcing titles like Neurodevelopmental Senior Associate. When Grace Williams was announced, independent researcher and specialist in child trauma recovery, there were murmurs. Then gasps, because when she walked onto the stage, poised in a navy blazer, flanked in the front row by Weston, Ivy, and Isla, the room saw something it hadn't expected. A woman of color, no formal institutional pedigree, commanding absolute attention. She opened with calm precision. Good morning. Today, I'm here to talk not about theory, but about reality. Not about statistics, but about two girls who taught me that no heart is too broken to heal. The screen behind her lit up with anonymized charts, testimonials, even video clips of laughter from the Harrow kitchen. These children, she said, had pushed away 15 adults in 8 months. Not because they were unruly, but because they were scared. Because no one ever told them that grief doesn't make them bad. It makes them human. She spoke for 40 minutes, citing studies from Stanford and Harvard, not just to impress, but to validate the emotional intelligence that often gets dismissed as instinct. And then she dropped the hammer. But healing doesn't happen in a vacuum, she said. It's shaped or sabotaged by the environment, by the adults. And when a caregiver is treated as suspect because of class or color or background, the children notice. She clicked to the next slide, a verbatim transcript, a party conversation. Patricia's words, captured from a baby monitor left accidentally on. People like that know how to act nice until they get what they want. The room froze. Patricia, seated near the stage, went pale. Ivy and Isla watched her, not with vengeance, with clarity. Grace continued. When children hear someone degrade the person they trust most, it reawakens every fear they've tried to bury. It tells them they were right to push love away, that adults are not safe. The silence was seismic. Then came the questions. Where did you study? Asked a Columbia professor. State University. Master's in Child Psychology. Thesis published last year. Will you be publishing this method? Asked another. Yes, she replied. The book's titled Authentic Connections, Healing Trauma Through Unconditional Love, Harvard Press. Spring release. The applause lasted 4 minutes. Weston Harrow sat stunned, realizing the woman who'd walked into his mansion with a pair backpack and a calm gaze was now a national voice in her field. The twins were beaming. Told you, Ivy whispered. She's a genius, Isla nodded. She's family. 6 months later, the Harrow estate looked the same from the outside. Manicured hedges, wrought iron gates, the same sandstone columns. But inside, everything had changed. The walls that once echoed with screams, slammed doors, and glitter trap. Mayhem now resonated with piano practice, laughter, and Sunday pancake rituals. Ivy and Isla weren't perfect. No child is, but they were present, open, alive in a way Weston hadn't seen since before the accident. The difference wasn't just in the girls, it was in him. Because for the first time he understood that healing children doesn't happen by fixing behavior. It happens by meeting pain where it hides, and staying. And Eleanor James had stayed. One Saturday morning, Isla sprinted into the study waving the local newspaper. Look, she's on the front page. Ivy followed, holding a tablet already open to the headline. Local expert redefines child trauma recovery. From maid to national pioneer. The photograph showed Eleanor receiving an award from the university president, a gold medallion hanging around her neck. Weston walked in moments later with fresh coffee and paused at the sight. He didn't say anything, just smiled, quietly grateful he had been smart enough, or maybe just desperate enough, to let her into their lives. She came in a moment later, towel in hand, wiping away flour from yet another impromptu baking lesson. So you've seen it, she said, laughing softly. Fame suits you, Weston said. You're the most Googled name in Westbridge this week. God help us, Eleanor teased. Do I at least look wise in the photo? Ivy jumped in. "You look powerful." Isla added, "You look like someone who can't be underestimated." Eleanor put her arms around them. "And you two? You look like proof. Proof that it doesn't matter where someone comes from. It matters who they choose to become." That afternoon, Weston received a call from the publisher. Eleanor's second book, a follow-up detailing advanced strategies for grief communication in children, already had 50,000 pre-orders. She wasn't just a case study. She had become a movement. Her methodology, her presence, her resilience, it was reshaping conversations in classrooms, social work departments, and even among government policy committees. And to think it had. All started with a cleaning job she almost turned down because of the commute. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Patricia Langford was living a different reality. She had resigned from 2 of the charity boards she once ruled with diamond-clad fists. The audio clip of her party remarks had made its way into public forums and non-profit circles. Her name was now synonymous not with elegance, but with exclusion. She called Eleanor once. A short, stiff voicemail. "I would like to apologize, publicly if you wish, for what I said." It was out of line. Eleanor never called back. But not out of malice. She simply didn't need to. She had moved on. And Patricia's apology wasn't for her. It was for Patricia's own daughters, who had watched her fall, not because she failed, but because she refused to grow. One evening, just before bed, Ivy crawled into Eleanor's room with a journal in hand. "I've been writing," she said shyly, "about you." Eleanor tilted her head. "About me? Well, about us, our family. Because that's what we are now, right?" "We always were," Eleanor said. Ivy hesitated. "Even though we don't match?" Eleanor reached for the child's hand. "Families don't match. They fit, and we fit. You, Isla, your dad, and me. We're not a picture-perfect puzzle. We're the kind of family that made its own shape." Later that night, Eleanor stepped outside onto the back porch. The moon hung low, reflecting off the silver-trimmed grass. Weston joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You ever think about how strange it is," he asked, "that someone I hired to clean the house ended up rebuilding the whole thing from the inside out?" Eleanor didn't answer at first. She just sipped. Then, "Not strange, just rare. Most people think fixing a house starts with the walls, but it starts with the people." He looked at her, the woman whose presence had unmasked years of grief, who had forced him to become a father instead of just a provider, who had taken 2 unruly girls and turned them into whole humans again. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the books, not for the awards, for staying." Eleanor nodded. "That's the part people never write down. The staying." In the months that followed the conference, Eleanor James became more than a name in academic circles. She became a symbol. Of what? Not just of resilience, not just of brilliance, but of quiet defiance. Defiance against systems that decide your worth based on degrees, accents, zip codes, or skin color. Her first book became a university syllabus. Her second, a bestseller. But she wasn't interested in accolades. Her proudest moment wasn't televised, wasn't tweeted, and wasn't printed in any journal. It was a Tuesday afternoon that Ivy and Isla had just come home from school. Backpacks flung on the floor, shoes in the wrong place, voices loud and messy in the best way. Eleanor stood in the doorway watching them. Ivy showed her a science project. Isla bragged about scoring a goal in PE. Then Isla turned around suddenly and asked, "Eleanor, do you think people can change their story?" Eleanor blinked. "What do you mean?" "Like, if everyone thinks you're one thing, but you're really not, can you still show them the truth?" Ivy added, "Because that's what you did. They saw a maid. But you were really a teacher, a writer, a hero." Eleanor smiled, not because of the compliment, but because these girls, once buried in grief and mischief, were now asking the right questions, big ones, deep ones. She knelt down and looked at them both. Yes, people can change their stories, but not by shouting, by showing, by living it. One brave day at a time. Back in Westbridge's high society, the conversation had shifted. People who once rolled their eyes at Eleanor's presence now quoted her work. Parents who had once sent their kids to etiquette camp were enrolling them in emotional resilience workshops inspired by her curriculum. At school pickup lines and charity banquets, former skeptics whispered about how they always knew she was special, conveniently forgetting the judgment they once wielded like a blade. But Eleanor didn't need their revisionist memory. She had something stronger. Legacy Dot at a community event in the fall. Eleanor stood at a booth surrounded by kids and parents, handing out flyers about trauma-informed parenting. Ivy and Isla were helping, explaining worksheets, laughing with other children, offering encouragement in that soft, unfiltered way that only healed children can. A woman approached the table. Late 40s, designer bag, hesitant posture. "You probably don't remember me," she said. Eleanor turned, smiled gently. "Mrs. Whitmore." Patricia swallowed hard. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything I said, everything I assumed. It was wrong. And I've spent the last few months trying to unlearn a lot." Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't soothe. She let the silence sit for a moment, then nodded. "Unlearning is harder than learning, but it's worth it." Patricia blinked back something unshed. "Your daughters are remarkable," she whispered. Eleanor looked over at Ivy and Isla, now helping a toddler find the crayons. "They are." Later that night, the four of them sat around the dining table, playing cards. Ivy was losing dramatically and blaming everyone but herself. Isla kept trying to trade candy for extra turns. Weston just laughed. Eleanor watched them all, not as an outsider anymore, as someone who belonged. "You know," she said softly, "the world's going to try to put you in boxes. Again and again. Neat ones, easy ones. But don't shrink to fit. Stretch the box, or throw it out." Ivy looked up. "Even when people don't like it." Eleanor nodded. "Especially then." So what is the takeaway of this story? That a maid became a mentor? That a grieving family found healing through an unlikely savior? Sure, but dig deeper. What this story really shows is that true power doesn't come from authority, it comes from empathy. That trauma doesn't make children unlovable, it makes them misunderstood. And that the most extraordinary people are often the ones no one saw coming. Eleanor James didn't just last more than a week. She transformed a lifetime. She didn't just clean the house. She cleaned the wound. And when you do that, when you see people for who they are instead of who they were hired to be, you don't just change a family. You rewrite the rules. You make a new story, one no one can ever erase again. Asterisk, you never know which person you're underestimating. Right now will one day change your world. What you call ordinary may be someone else's lifeline. Eleanor didn't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. She just showed up. And stayed. And that made all the difference.